So we continue where we left off. We're getting a little taste of Gemara, which we get every day in davening, the end, Rabbi Yishmael Omer, which we read in order to fulfill the obligation to learn Torah, learn a little Gemara every day. And this is the foundation of the whole entire oral Torah. This is the introduction to the third book of Leviticus, which is all filled with laws. And many of these laws we derive based on these rules. All of this was given to Moshe at Sinai. This is from Hashem. Hashem is telling us how to decode the Torah. And there are 13 rules. Now we're up to rule number 7. On page 25 in our prayer book here. It says, kelal shu tzarich leprat, umiprat shu tzarich lekelal. When the general rule requires specification to clarify the meaning of the general rule, so then the general rule is not limited to that specific particular. Usually we just learned last week, whenever it says a general, then it says something specific. So it means only what's specific. Only what's specified, nothing else. That's only if the specific doesn't clarify anything. The general rule can stand on its own. It doesn't need any clarification. But in the case where it needs a clarification, then it's not limited to the specific. The specific is there not to limit it, but it's just there to clarify for us. And the same is the reverse. Miprat u'tzarich leklal. The same is true when first you have something specific, and then the Torah concludes with the generalization. So we learned earlier, one of the rules is that then the generalization includes everything. But that's only if the specifics doesn't need any clarification. But if it needs a clarification, if it needs a generalization in order to clarify it, then it doesn't include everything. What does that mean? An example, concrete example. The Torah says that when you slaughter, when you shecht a kosher wild animal or a bird, a chicken, you have a mitzvah. In Parshas Achri Mois, you have to cover the blood. So the expression in the Torah is v'chiso ba'ofer. You should cover it ba'ofer, with dirt. Now, based on the principle that we learned last week, rule number 4, the only thing you should be allowed to use is earth. So he says here, in principle, rule number 7, it's not so. Because v'chiso, when you say in Hebrew to cover, what does cover mean, to cover? Cover means I put a pot over it and I cover it up. So I would think the mitzvah is that after you slaughter the bird or the chicken or the 7 kosher non-domesticated animals, is a mitzvah to cover the blood. Put a tarp over it, cover it up with a vessel or something. So the Torah has to clarify. No, that what it means v'chiso means ba'afar, that it has to blend in. It has to be the type of cover where the blood becomes blended with the earth. It becomes blended until it's covered up. It's not enough just to cover it, put a cover over it. The blood itself has to become blended now and disappear in the earth. So I wouldn't know that without the specification. I would not understand what v'chiso means. So in this case, the offer is not limiting. It doesn't only have to be offer. It can be many things, not just earth. An example of the reverse, where the Torah starts out with specifics, and then the Torah has to clarify, and then needs the generalization to clarify. So for example, this is an example where you have both rules operating together. It says in the Torah, you have to redeem firstborn. Okay, what's a firstborn? I would think any firstborn, boy, girl. So the Torah says, a boy. The specification is coming to clarify what bechor means, a boy. If it only said a boy, I would say the firstborn boy. Could be child number 3, child number 2, 3, 4, the first boy. So the Torah specifies and says no, the opening of the womb. The Torah is clarifying that when we say firstborn, we don't mean any firstborn boy. What we mean is the first opening of the womb. Only if the boy is the firstborn, is the first child. But we're not done yet. I would think that as long as it's the firstborn child born naturally, let's say if before that there was a boy or a girl born a C-section, cesarean. So it's not opening of the womb. He needed surgery, he had to cut the womb. It wasn't the opening of the womb. So the next child, the first boy that's born who's the first child to be born naturally, you have to redeem that child. So that's why the specification of the opening of the womb needs the generalization of Bechor. Bechor means the first. Yes, it's the first boy that's born naturally, but it's not the first, it's not the Bechor. There was already a C-section, there was already a child born before. The boy or girl doesn't matter, so that boy is not a Bechor because it was a C-section, and the next boy is also not because he's not a Bechor. Yes, it's the first male opening of the womb, but it's not a Bechor, it's not the first. So in such a case, you need the clarification. The specification is clarifying the generalization, and the generalization is clarifying the specification. Rule number 8. Kol davar shayu b'chlal. When a particular case that's already included in the general law, and it's singled out to instruct us something new. It's not only coming to teach a law concerning itself. It's coming to teach a law that concerns the general law. For example, it says in the Torah, you're not allowed to do work on Shabbos. That includes any work, any of the 39 categories of work. Which includes, don't light a fire. Then the Torah says, mitzvah 114, the last mitzvah in the book of Exodus, don't light a fire on Shabbos. It was already included. The Torah said, don't do any work. That includes all 39 categories of work, including, don't light a fire on Shabbos. So what's it coming to teach me? What if a person went ahead and desecrated Shabbos, did work on Shabbos unintentionally? So you have to bring a sacrifice. So this rule number 8, is coming to teach me that the case of don't light a fire is unique. The Torah is singling out in the category of work of lighting a fire, that if you do light a fire alone, you have to bring a sin offering. But all the other categories of work, you don't bring a sin offering unless you do all 38 categories of work. So that's what he's saying, no. Since it was included in the generalization of don't do work, and yet the Torah singled it out to teach us a new law, that you do this particular work. You have to bring a sin offering, so it's coming to teach us on the entire generalization, that any of the 39 categories of work, you have to bring a separate sin offering for each category. So if a person violates 39 categories of work, you have to bring 39 sacrifices, 39 sin offerings. And that we learn from Leisavaru Eish, from that the Torah singled out Leisavaru Eish. Another example, the Torah says that a peace offering is one of the offerings in the temple. And if an impure person eats any sacred offering, sacred animal, eats from the meat of a sacred offering, your life gets cut off. So it was already included in the generalization. Any sacrifice, any sacred animal, meat, if you eat it, your life gets cut off. Then the Torah specifies, if a person who's impure eats from the peace offering, his life will get cut off. Why is the Torah singling out a peace offering? So it's coming to teach us, not only regarding the peace offering, it's coming to teach us regarding the generalization, that what type of sacred animal, what type of sacred meat, if a person who's impure eats from this meat, so his punishment is that his life gets cut off. Hashem will cut off his life, he will die. That's only if it's similar to a peace offering. In other words, any sacrifice which is sacred, to the exclusion of, let's say, it belongs to the temple treasury. It belongs to the temple treasury means it's financially it belongs to the temple treasury, but it doesn't have the level of sanctity of a sacrifice. It doesn't belong to the altar. It belongs to the temple treasury, in which the temple is allowed to sell this animal and use the money for the temple needs. But an animal that's been holy, that's been designated as a sacrifice, whether it's the holy of holy animals, kachim, holier animals, or less sacred animals, but it's an animal that was dedicated as a sacrifice. Any animal is dedicated as a sacrifice. If a person who's impure eats from that meat, your life gets cut off. Then we have rule number 9. Kol davar shehoya b'chlal. When a particular case is included in the general rule, then it's singled out. It's singled out to add another provision which is similar to the general law. So in this case, yatsa lahakil v'loy lahachim. It's singled out in order to lessen to be lenient, but not to be severe. An example, we learn the laws of a leprosy. So if you have a skin discoloration, the skin turns white, anywhere from an intense white like snow to white of plaster, white of an egg, or the white of wool, from snow white all the way to the white of an egg, then you are a Metzora, and then we have to seclude you. You have to go into seclusion for 7 days, and then we have to check. Did it spread? 2 black hairs turned into 2 white hairs? Or if in the middle of this discoloration you have a healthy patch of skin. So those 3 signs, if it spreads, or if it's healthy skin in the middle, or if 2 black hairs turn white, then he becomes impure. Then he's quarantined and he's designated as a definite Metzora. If a week goes by and nothing happens, you lock him up a second week. And after 2 weeks, the Kohen checks. Was the spreading of the discoloration? Did it spread? Did the area and the skin spread? More skin became discolored? Did any black hair turn white? It was formerly black and turned white? And do you have any healthy skin? So this includes any discoloration. Then the Torah tells us something new. That if a person had a wound on your skin, a sickness, a wound, or you had a fire touch your skin, got burnt, a burn, and it starts healing, the wound starts healing, or the burn starts healing. So the Torah says, in that case, if the black hair turns into 2 white hair, then you become a Metzora, you become a definite leper. So it was included in the Metzora, and the Torah yet singles it out and tells us that it has its own separate laws. Because here, Torah says only you lock up for 1 week. After 1 week you check if there's been a spreading or if it turned into white hair. And the Torah doesn't say you lock up for a second week. And the Torah doesn't say if you have healthy skin in the middle of the wound, and that's a sign of leprosy. Regularly that's a sign of leprosy, not in this case. So in this case, the Torah is coming to be lenient. The Torah is saying that there's only 1 sign of leprosy, not the other 2 signs, and you don't lock up for a second week, only 1 week. And if there's no spreading, and the hairs did not turn white, then you let him free, he's pure. He's no longer quarantined, you send him home and he's good. So since it was included in the generalization, and the Torah singles out, the Torah is being lenient and not strict. The Torah is telling us that this does not have the stringencies of a regular leprosy. This is different. That's why the Torah is singling out. That it's entirely different. So only what the Torah singles out applies. In this case, it's a leniency, and there is not the strictness of a regular Metzora. Or, for example, Torah says if a person kills someone, that can mean intentional, it can mean unintentional, so everything is included. Then the Torah starts spelling out, and if a person does it unintentionally, the Torah says you have to send them to the cities of refuge. So the Torah is coming to be lenient. The Torah is telling us only the cities of refuge. Don't put him to death. Even though it started out in general, if you kill someone, you put to death. So I would think maybe when the Torah singles out someone who kills unintentionally, so you should do both. Send them to the city of refuge and then put him to death. He says, no. When the Torah takes it out, when he's included, then the Torah takes it out, and it's the same inyan. It's about someone putting someone to death. So what the Torah spells out, that's exactly only that. That's the only thing that applies to him. City of refuge, there is no death penalty. So that's an example of something that was included, and the Torah singled it out. Since the Torah singled it out, it's coming to be lenient and not to be strict. But then rule number 10 is kol davar shehaya b'chelal. Anything that was included, it's included in the general law. The particular law was included in the general law. V'yatzel litin, and the Torah singled it out, litin tan acher, to add another provision, shaloi kinyan, which is unlike the general provision. In this case, yatzel lahakel or lahachmer, it's to be lenient and to be stringent. In some aspects, he's being lenient, it's to lessen its severity. In some aspects, it's to make it even more strict than the generalization. For example, when it comes to leprosy, then the Torah tells us that if a person has a bald spot in the place of your beard, in the place of your hair, so there is a whole different set of rules of leprosy applies. Torah tells us something new, that in that bald spot, we have to watch and see if there's 2 hairs, and 2 hairs turn blonde, yellow. Not like a regular leprosy where the sign of leprosy is that the two black hairs turn white. Here, two hairs turn yellow. So the Torah is teaching us something new. Till now we didn't learn, the yellow hair doesn't mean anything in a regular leprosy, in a regular skin discoloration. It's only in the place of the head, the hair, the place of the beard, that if there's a bald spot, then we start looking if two hairs turn blonde, yellow. And over there, white is not a sign of impurity. It's a leniency and a stringency. It's a stringency that yellow hair, that blonde hair is a sign of leprosy, unlike any place else in the body, wherever there's skin discoloration, blonde hair doesn't mean anything. But it's also a leniency. White hair doesn't mean anything in the place of the bald spot, and even discoloration. That's not what makes it a leprosy. The skin could turn white, it doesn't matter. There's even a question, an argument, whether in the place of the bald spot there has to be any skin discoloration. Is the skin totally natural? But the fact that there's a bald spot, that's already a sign that could be a sign of leprosy. And if the two hairs that are still there, if they turn blonde, that's a sign of leprosy. Or no, there has to be some discoloration, some level of white or some discoloration. That's a whole argument amongst the rabbis, the interpretation of the Torah. But so it's a leniency also. White hair does not cause it to become a leper, and all the intense discoloration of the skin doesn't either. The criteria is the two remaining hair that it turn into blonde. Since the Torah, it was included in leprosy, and then the Torah takes it away from that and introduces something new entirely, blonde hair, a new halacha, a new law. So therefore, it's a leniency and it's a strictness. It's a leniency that white hair does not cause it to become a leper, and it's a stringency that yellow hair, unlike the rest of the body, does cause it to become the person to become a leper. Rule number 11: Kol davar shaya b'chelal v'yata lidim davar chadash. When something particular was included in the general law, then the Torah singles it out for a new law, something new. You cannot return it back to the general law unless the pasuk returns it back explicitly, returns it back to the general law. Meaning, truma, an Israelite is not allowed to eat truma. It's holy. The truma that you give to the kohen is sacred. Only a kohen is allowed to eat from it, but the Torah says the kohen and his household can eat from it. His wife, his sons, his daughters, his Canaanite servants, his Canaanite maids, anyone in his household can eat. So the daughter is included. She's a family of the kohen. She's allowed to eat from the truma. Then the Torah tells us something new. That if the daughter of the kohen gets married to an Israelite, she can no longer eat the truma. She's taken out, something new. She's no longer considered part of the household of the kohen. Question is, what happens if her husband dies? She becomes a widow. She has no children from her husband. She's no longer the wife of an Israelite. Do you say automatically she's now once again part of the household of the kohen and she can eat the truma? She's allowed? No, that's what he's saying here. I can't say that on my own. Once the Torah introduces something new, a new situation, a new halacha, a new situation, that this is different, that once she marries to an Israelite or a Levite, she can no longer eat from the truma, then it's over. She can no longer eat from the truma, unless the Torah teaches us, and there is a pasuk that teaches us that she's allowed to go back and eat truma. She's considered once again as the household of a kohen. She's a daughter of a kohen. She's allowed to eat. So I need a special pasuk to teach me that. It doesn't happen automatically. Until the pasuk has to tell me. The pasuk has to teach me that you're allowed to go back. Without the pasuk teaching me, I wouldn't know that. I would not be allowed to go back. Another example. We know that the guilt offering that the mitzvah, the leper has to bring 3 sacrifices once he's purified. And one of them is a guilt offering, because leprosy comes as a result of sin, of lashon hara, so he's guilty. He needs a guilt offering for his sin. And the guilt offering is like any other from Kodshei HaKadoshim. It's a holy sacrifice. You have to slaughter it like we learned. We learned in chapter 5 of Zvachim, Ezeu Mekayman, which we said right before this. You have to offer it in the northern side of the altar. You have to slaughter it. It has to be treated like any other category of kotche kotche. But yet, the Torah introduces something new, something different when it comes to the guilt offering of the Mitzayra. What does the Torah say? Torah says that you have to take from the blood and you have to sprinkle from the blood of the animal. After you slaughter it, you have to receive the blood, and you have to put it on his right thumb, in his earlobe, the right earlobe, on his right toe. You have to smear the blood on the Mitzayra's right thumb, right toe, and his earlobe. So wait a minute. This is different. This is something new. All the other sacrifices, when you slaughter the animal, you take the blood, the entire blood, and you have to pour it on the altar. You have to throw it on the altar. And it has to hit the two corners, or it has to get to all four walls. So the blood should reach all four sides of the altar. But here the Torah introduces something new, something novel, something different, something that's a contradiction to that. Because here you're not taking all the blood. You're taking some of the blood, and you're using the blood to smear the blood on his right thumb, on his right toe, and on his right earlobe. So maybe I would think that in this case, this is different than all the other sacrifices. That I don't throw the blood on the altar. Instead, I'm just using the blood to smear on the mitzvah, on the leper, to purify, instead of the altar. That's what he's saying. Something that it's part of the general rule. It's a sacrifice like any other kotche. But here there's something new, something different. So since there's something different, you would not be able to return it to the general principle. Even though everything else is exactly identical to the general principle, it's a kotche, you offer the sacrifice on the northern side. But since the Torah introduces something new, that instead of the entire blood being sprinkled on the altar, instead you use the blood to smear it on the mitzvah to purify him, so maybe I shouldn't sprinkle the blood on the altar at all. So unless the pasuk would tell me, that's why we need a special pasuk. I need a special pasuk to tell me that yes, that this guilt offering should be treated exactly like a sin offering, meaning the leftover blood you should sprinkle on the altar. It seems like it's exactly identical to rule number 10. It's exactly what we just said. When the Torah comes to teach you something new, so whatever the Torah says, and whatever it doesn't say, it doesn't say. Because over there, the Torah doesn't say another pasuk that says, well, you should treat the leprosy of the bald spots exactly the same like the other discoloration. Here, the Torah tells me clearly. The Torah has to tell me, that you should know that you should treat the guilt offering of the mitzvah exactly like you treat a sin offering. You should sprinkle the blood. Had the Torah not tell me explicitly, I would say not. Because since it's something new, so I have to stick to what's new. But here it's a bigger novelty. Here it's even a bigger novelty. Because here, in this case, in every other way, the sin offering, the guilt offering is exactly like a sin offering, like any other holy offering, sacred offering. It's slaughtered on the northern side. Everything else is identical. This is the only thing that's different. The Torah says you should take some of the blood and sprinkle it on the right thumb and the right toe and the right earlobe. And nevertheless, he says, had the Torah not explicitly brought it back into the general principle, that you should treat it 100% like the general principle, like all other sacrifices, that you have to sprinkle the blood on the altar, I would not assume that. I couldn't assume that on my own. I would say, since the Torah introduces something novel and it treats it differently than other sacrifices, so and I'm taking some of the blood away, maybe in this case I should not sprinkle it on the altar. That's why I need a pasuk to teach me that you do sprinkle it on the altar. Okay, rule number 12, davar halamed minyane, something that you learn from its context. Davar halamed miseifei, and something that you learn from the passages, from the context. In other words, there are things that the Torah doesn't spell out, but you can learn it from the context. For example, it says in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal. So the question is, what does it mean? What's the Torah referring to? If you look at the context, before that the Torah said, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery. So what kind of crimes are we talking about? Look at the context. What kind of crimes are we talking about? We're talking about capital crimes, capital punishment. Stealing is not a capital crime, it's not a capital punishment. So from the context we understand when the Torah says in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not steal, we're not talking about regular run-of-the-mill stealing. We're talking about kidnapping, which is a capital punishment, a capital crime. Don't steal a person, don't kidnap a person. So the context, I can derive from the context what the Torah means. An example of something that you learn from a subsequent passage, again, we go back to leprosy. So if there's leprosy in the home, the Torah says, what do? How do you purify the home? You have to knock down the house, knock down, if there's leprosy, you have to knock it down. First you knock out the part where you have the leprosy, and then you repatch it and see if it comes back. So when the Torah says a home, I'm not sure what material this home is made out of. Is it a home made of canvas? Is it a home made of plywood? Is it a home made of stone? Does it have to be a home made of stone and wood and earth, clay? Or it could be a home made of any material. Plastic home, I don't know, I can make it of any material. But when the Torah says how you purify it, that you have to knock down, take out the stone and knock out the wood and remove the earth. So from that context, I understand when the Torah is referring to a home, what kind of home are we referring to? A home that's built from stone and clay and wood together. Only that's categorized as a home regarding the laws of leprosy. That's a home that could have leprosy, and all the laws of leprosy apply to that home, and not a home made of other material. So again, the Torah doesn't say it explicitly, but this is one of the ways how you derive, because you look at what it says at the end.